Hi everyone, my name is Brittany Zajic and I'm a member of the 20 under 35 cohort, one of the 20 people under 35 who the industry has named as a future leader. We are proud, along with SES, to be a sponsor of this new special series of the Better Satellite World called Space for All. And now, here is the host of our series, Lou Zaccarilla.
Well, thank you, Brittany. And hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of the Better Satellite World, a podcast of Space and Satellite Professionals International. We continue with the fourth episode of our new series, Space for All. Today, we'll explore the idea of space for humanity. But first, Space for All is sponsored by SES and the 20 under 35 cohort. SES is a satellite and terrestrial telecommunications network company providing connectivity everywhere to broadcasters, internet service and network operators, governments, and institutions. SES says, let us take your story anywhere. The 20 under 35 cohort are executives under 35 years of age in the space and satellite industry who, this past October, the industry named as the most promising future leaders on the planet. Because it believes in the future of commercial space, SES is also matching the contribution of the 20 under 35 to support this series. The Better Satellite World podcast is also supported by the corporate partners of SSPI, Eutelsat, EchoStar Hughes, Peraton, and Access Intelligence, content with context. Additional support comes from the 3,000 professional members of SSPI and our chapters around the world, including our UK chapter, host of the 2020 Better Satellite World Awards taking place today. Thank you. Space for humanity, beautiful phrase, but what does it mean? Because human beings are fast becoming citizens of places beyond Earth. We have reached that emotional tipping point. Advancing our civilization will be complex, it will be expensive, and it will require new ways of thinking about politics, commercial investments, and, well, just about everything. My guest today believes that key to this evolution will be a psychological incorporation of the overview effect. As you know from our conversations with our friend Frank White, this means looking at the Earth with a fresh understanding. Rachel Lyons got to this place long ago, and I'm delighted to finally get her on this podcast. Rachel is a prominent advocate for the advancement of space technology and exploration. She's the former vice chair of the board of directors for Students for the Exploration and Development of Space in the USA. A former public radio host, she holds degrees in aerospace engineering and economics from the University of Miami. Hi, Rachel.
Thank you so much, Lou.
It's great to have you. I really have been looking forward to speaking with you, and I've been watching some of the stuff that you've been putting out, some of the conversations, and they're really wonderful. So I really wanted to explore the concept of space for humanity. And first question is the obvious one. How did you come up with this concept? What is space for humanity for the listeners who don't know what it is?
Well, I have to say that I am not the one who came up with this genius concept. Our founder's name is Dylan Taylor, and he is just amazing space leader. He's he's on the founding board of Space Angel Investors. He's known as the most active space investor in the world. He's invested in over 40 early stage space startups. Now is working with an organization that he just founded called Voyager Space Holdings. And he came up with Space for Humanity as a project out of a fellowship that he had at the Aspen Institute, where the group essentially, they all said, okay, if you could create an impact on the world, then where do you want to create your impact? And he said that there was people working in all different areas like climate change and poverty and supporting people who were suffering from starvation and all these different things all around the world. And he said, okay, so with these challenges are so massive and so complex, and like, what is at the core of it? Like, what is at the root of all of these? And what he found is that what all of these had in common was that there were issues around perspective. that they were like, it's like with climate change, for example, it's like, if we collectively looked at the world from a global perspective, then we would have such a deeper understanding of what's happening to our planet and how something in China impacts what's happening in the US. And so we said, if people expanded their perspective and actually looked at these things from a global context, we would come up with solutions to these problems in a new way. And so that's what led to the founding of Space for Humanity. So Dylan was always a space fan. I think as a little boy, he loved looking up at the stars, and he and I both were a big fan of this cognitive shift called the overview effect.
Of course.
And yeah, so just for those who don't know, it's the cognitive shift that happens to astronauts when they go to space and experience our planet as a planet floating in the universe.
Yep. And that's great. Thank you for that explanation. And the question for you is, we're probably threefold, but I'm going to start with one. We understand the need for equality of opportunity in the economy and in society, but realistically, space still seems a place for a few, a very, very specially trained few. How far are we, Rachel, from having the need to even consider a policy that gives access to all, or have we really started to go down that path?
It's a really good
realistically
question. Yeah, totally. It's a really good question. And I would say both. I think it's very obvious when we look at the leadership of many organizations, and you see it's a very, very select few, and you look at the demographic of astronauts, and it's people with the highest, very, very high levels of education and a very specific demographic. And it's a growth point. Like, we have a very far way to go, and it's a systemic problem. It's like, it's not just going to change from us doing outreach efforts for like the next class that we hire. Like, it has to start from the bottom. Like, we need to start with educating children and giving children of different backgrounds opportunities so that they can then grow up to know that working in space and being part of space and all of that is actually possible for them. So, so I think, yeah, to answer your question, is that it's a big growth point for us, and I've seen a lot of space organizations taking a lot of initiative specifically to open up access to space for all. Like, they know that it doesn't serve anyone for us to be an echo chamber. What's really amazing, and what's really going to create change in society as well as in the space sector, is for us to spread our message far and wide. Yeah,
exactly. And, that's obviously what we've tried to do at SSPI with our Better Satellite World campaign. As most people know, inside our industry, for a long, long time, the idea of a satellite industry was one that was largely a technological priesthood, right? It was like, the church in the Middle Ages. The priests spoke Latin, and nobody else knew what they were talking about, but they knew something glorious was going on. What we tried to do is to look and really change the narrative, and to tell people, this is what satellites do. Satellites cure polio. Satellites help monitor the seas. And so we really decided in our own little way to turn around the dialogue and to tell stories about, how satellites are making the human species better every day. And again, it sounds, again, like that is something that Space for Humanity considers part of the perspective shift, right? Thinking about, I think you quoted Angela Davis in one of your manifestos, about thinking about the collective versus the individual. How important is the overview effect on that notion? Is it something that can be promulgated into a story, or is it just sort of a state of consciousness where we're now all woke to the fact that there's something else going on, something greater than ourselves.
So part of me wants to say the overview effect is essential. And I stand by that it is essential in order for us to think from that collective perspective, for us to transcend our identities that keep us separate, for us to think from a global context, address the challenges from a global context. It is a sure way to get there. Like it is, there's so many quotes of astronauts going to space and saying, what would it be like if political leaders saw the Earth from 100,000 miles away? Like it would fundamentally shift their view. I was just looking at a Michael Collins quote that said that yesterday.
Yeah.
Like you were saying before, around, foreign travel, going to new cultures, around education. Some people talk about the power of psychedelics. There's a lot of different ways that people talk about that can get us thinking from this place of interconnectedness. This knowledge that as humans, our commonalities far outweigh our differences. There's other ways to do it, and the way that I'm doing it, the way that Space for Humanity is doing it, and the way that the whole space sector has the ability to do it is through the overview effect.
Yeah. It's interesting, Rachel, because it seems like what is happening is that the religious concepts that we've lived with as humanity for, since time immemorial, and science, which, we've had only recently in terms of the overall age of the human species, have been separate in a certain way. But it seems like now they're beginning to merge, and space is sort of the delivery vehicle of it, right? And so now we're looking at space, and we may have sort of fallen away from traditional religious concepts and philosophies, not because they're useless to us, but because we've got a new appreciation of that greater thing, whatever it is. And the ability to get there using science, I think, and technology puts those two things almost on a path together, which I think is very virtuous. But I wanted to ask you, how did you come to your sort of realization that space should be for humanity and that it was the most important thing for human beings now to pursue and think about and develop policies and a future economy for and so forth? Was there an awakening moment or episode for you?
Yep. Yeah. And I love everything that you said, just so much there and what you just shared. So thank you. Yeah, there was. And I was 19 years old. I was with a childhood friend, and he insisted on us watching the first episode of Neil deGrasse Tyson's Cosmos. And before
Right.
that, I never had an interest in space. It just wasn't, it never, I learned about it in school and it never registered as a real thing, because school was so much just memorizing and regurgitating information, which I could be good at. And I never fully felt that space was real, that we actually live on a planet in a universe. And I watched this episode where Neil deGrasse Tyson starts from the Earth and he does our cosmic address, and he zooms out to the solar system and out to the Milky Way and out to the local group and out and out and out and out. And it was truly the most single most profound awakening I've ever had. Like seeing and comprehending and feeling that reality of our existence, that we live on this tiny special planet and everything on it is interconnected, and all of that. Like, it was my own experience of the overview effect. And I immediately went into aerospace engineering, and it was a few months later at the SEDS conference, Students for the Exploration and Development of Space, that I met Frank, and he talked about the overview effect, and I just realized that this kind of thing was what happened to me, and this kind of thing can happen to anyone. And it really changed my life. Like, it changed my perspective on, it changed the way I treated other people and the way I saw my place in this world, and I had this new understanding for how we need to live on our planet. Like, it's a closed system and we must take care of it. So yeah. It's really one of the most, that friend that showed me that episode, I am forever indebted to him. Like, every time I see him, I just give him the biggest hug, because I'm like, my life will never ever be the same because of that. And as well as many other lives, you know, like I'm just by us sharing this message, it is changing people's lives and their perspectives, and that's the goal.
It is, and I don't know if you have this feeling, but knowing that and being a part of that, and knowing that you're a part of it, right, existentially, it creates a certain lightness for me. But coming back to Earth, I don't know if you saw in July, the July 13th issue of Space News, there was a terrific article by Deborah Werner and Caleb Henry on how the space sector is responding to the killing of George Floyd. And they opened the article, as I recall, going back to July 1969, and of course the Apollo launch. And they noted that there were civil rights protesters marching outside the Kennedy Space Center the day before the Apollo launch. And that was the backdrop to, sort of a nation struggling to address the racial issues that are the particular original sin of America. We're in a similar situation today, right? The motion has gone forward. We're still trying to resolve this issue and live harmoniously. There are the same cries now to sort of defund space or space exploration because, wow, we've got so many problems here. We've got to spend our money here. Same argument. Where do you come down on that in terms of how we should be spending our money, how we should be addressing some of the issues that are right in our faces now in our cities?
Yeah, really, really good and important question. And I get that a lot too about like, why would we be going to space when we have all these problems here on Earth and these like serious, real problems. And I tell people like, they're totally right that we do, these problems on Earth need to be addressed. And I also go back to Earthrise when we went around the moon, and that there's many historians that say that sparked the modern environmental movement. And then you talk about like what satellites do and what they track and the progress that we've been able to make because of them being in space. And then we talk about the overview effect and how people, when you're in space, it's like we just transcend the identities that keep us separate. And you see, and I'm saying for the third time in the episode, but like our commonalities far outweigh our differences, and there's a common life force. Actually, to go into like what you were saying around like religion and spirituality and all of that, it's like that's, for me, it's the interconnectedness. It's seeing that there's life on this planet that connects all of us, and that's what makes us all connected to each other and to the planet and to nature. And when we look at space exploration and we look at the perspective that it brings and the inspiration that it brings, I assert that it adds energy to the movements, like to the forwarding of these movements. It helps us and like I said before, address the problems that we face from the actual context that they're happening on, so that we don't get stuck in the polarity and the this versus them and this and that. I see it as being an essential thing to accelerating our progress.
Yeah, that's well said. And I think what's extraordinary now about our industry is that, again, I really thank Frank White primarily for it, but there are a lot of people, Dylan, of course, another one, is that we finally found our philosophy, sort of our way of thinking about ourselves in the bigger picture. And when you start doing that and you start, as you say, putting all of those pieces together, you really do get a sense of all the good that has been done by the industry with the aspirations that we have. And I think that is something for sure to build on. And of course, you do it every day, right? You're working on this concept every day. 2020 was definitely not the year with perfect vision, but what was your highlight the first part of this year?
It's also interesting that everyone is like, it does feel like there's like a collective blame on the year for what's occurring. Whereas like what's happening in this year is just a reflection of where our systems currently are and like the systems that we've built. And and things that actually really aren't working. And so like other stuff gets bubbled to the surface, and then it's 2020 is being blamed. So that's my one thought on like seeing all those memes that people saying about 2020. And my favorite thing in space with 2020, well, I guess I can talk about it from the Space for Humanity standpoint. We hosted a Demo 2 launch party on Zoom, and we hosted a Mars 2020 launch party to celebrate both of those launches. And it was amazing. We brought together thousands of people and astronauts and Bill Nye and other celebrities and actors from The Expanse and our founder Dylan and just amazing space leaders and people outside of the space sector to come together and celebrate this.
Yeah.
And this is a historic moment. You know, like we sent a lander and a helicopter to Mars. And through public-private partnership, we launched to the International Space Station. And now, because of the shifting culture and the using of Zoom for everything, we are able to bring together people from all over the world. You know, maybe if COVID wasn't happening, we would have had an in-person gathering. It would have been really lovely and a really beautiful way to celebrate. And there's barriers to entry there. Like people can't fly in from Morocco to come and hear Bill Nye speak necessarily. And with our goal of opening up space for all of humanity, with this new focus on having gatherings online, we've been able to spread our message and include people from walks of life and from backgrounds and countries that wouldn't otherwise be a part of it.
Right.
So I think that's my favorite thing.
Yeah. So you've obviously moved the ball forward by taking what I think is it looks like the first step for Space for Humanity, which is giving more and more people a sense of what's available there and what the industry is really doing to improve their lives, to create that level of consciousness first. And you know, I remind people too that there's no Zoom, there's no broadcasting, there's none of this ability to collect people without satellites again, right? And there's no better point to multi-point device ever invented than a satellite for a broadcast signal, and we're doing it again with the new media. So again, we're front and center there, and you know, we're helping to hopefully make space available for humans. And final question: can we really be more humane by having access to space, or is it just going to be, in a lot of ways, more of the same?
It's a really, really, really good question. And I think on so many levels, we need change, not only from the individual levels, but then also from the collective and the systems that we have. And like, we need to build ones that are more humane. And I can tell you from personal experience that space and the space perspective and the overview perspective has had that kind of impact on me. Mm-hmm. And it's made me love people more and treat people with more love and respect and completely change the foundation in which I live my life. And if we, one by one, if we can do that for people and if we can change it collectively, that's when people make different kinds of decisions when voting or when making decisions for large corporations or when passing a stranger on the street. So, and I think just fundamentally, it starts with our perspectives. And then with that, on a collective level, we can actually start to shift culture. So my answer to you is yes.
Yes. So listen, I thank you for making the time to speak with us today on the Better Satellite World. We hope you come back. You're welcome to come back anytime you want.
Thank you so much, Lou. It was so much fun.
That concludes our visit with Rachel Lyons. Many thanks to the Space for All series sponsors, SES and the 20 under 35 cohort. Thanks also to the corporate partners of SSPI, Eutelsat, EchoStar Hughes, Peraton, and Access Intelligence for their ongoing financial support. Join me next time when we speak with Hira Muzamil about the emerging role of women in our industry. You can learn more about supporting this and other SSPI programs by contacting us at sspi.org. Please follow us and our Better Satellite World campaign and use the free videos and content by going to bettersatelliteworld.com. And follow us on Twitter at SSPI and check us out on LinkedIn and in Facebook. Okay, those are my directives for you. We're out of here. For Space and Satellite Professionals International and our producer Ana Gomez, I'm Lou Zaccarella. Let's make it a better satellite world. Take care.